Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter and on TikTok. Folks, please send in your comments, please send in your greetings, and please tell us where you're watching from. This is our 50th, that is 50, our 50th edition of Good Evening Britain since we started this particular programme last year. And 50 is a great benchmark to hit, and what a week to hit it in as well, with the SNP in absolute disarray. And will they ever get back together again? Will they ever find their mojo again? Well, do you know what? It's going to take them some time to recover. And oh, happy days, we are so grateful for that, because their difficulty is, of course, our opportunity. And that's what we're here for, folks. We are here to laugh at the state of the SNP these days, and also to, as we always do, keep the British end up. And tonight we've got a great guest coming on at 7:30. It is the ever popular Ash, that Preston Journalist, as he styles himself. He's been on before. He's always a big favourite of the viewers. And so please stick around for that. That's at 7:30. We'll be bringing Ash into the programme for a chat to find out what his thoughts are as well on the state of play of politics here in Scotland. And if you're watching on TikTok at 7:30, you won't be able to see the interview, so you'll just hear me listening, or you'll see me listening rather. And if you want to see it, you need to go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Folks, please give us a follow on TikTok if you're not already. And we will not be able to get round to playing any Bay City Rollers tonight, I'm afraid, but maybe some other time. Good. TC says, good evening all fellow Unionists everywhere, as does Debbie. Hello to Debbie. I hope you are keeping well tonight, Debbie. Derek says, good evening, Alistair, and wow, what a great Wednesday was last week, and such huge responses to AFFG on YouTube, and welcome to those just joining the AFFG family. Keeping it real here with the AFFG family. Thanks for those comments, Derek. And yeah, the YouTube programme last week really got thousands and thousands of views. It was really, really good stuff. D. Stanners, good evening to you, sir. And to Adam, hello from Leicestershire. We have successfully purged the Sturge, haven't we just? The Sturge has been purged. Oh, happy day. Kat says, hello everybody, great to see Ashley's joining you later. He does a brilliant job exposing the SNP, doesn't he just, Kat? Almost every day he's got a wee 1, 2, 3 minute video knocking the SNP in some manner or form, and getting thousands of followers as well for it, so good for him. And he's hit on a good formula there. So really looking forward to talking to him. Catherine says, good evening. Sturgeon free in 23. Absolutely. We've got the best rhymes. Hello to Stuart as well from Elgin, who says, good evening, fellow Brits. Good evening, fellow Brits as well, watching on TikTok. And Harvey, good evening from the West Midlands. Well, the West Midlands was in the news today. I don't know if the West Midlands is, what's the place called? Atherstone, I think it is. They had a ball game yesterday. I say ball game in a very kind of a broad terminology. It was, they have it every Pancake Tuesday, and they've been having it for the last something like 823 years. And there's this video of them. Atherstone, yeah, between Birmingham and Leicester, just north of Coventry. I don't know if that's anywhere where you are, Harvey, but they were having this game, and what a ruck went on. I might, towards the end of the show, if we can find that video, we might play it for you. But it's a hilarious ruck. It looked blooming dangerous as well. The punches, it's millions of views as well, millions of views on Twitter. We'll be talking about that more later. Good. Adam says, can we please just call an election so that the SNP can be booted out quickly? Well, the only people that can call an election, I think, are the SNP. If they somehow manage to disband Holyrood, then they can call an election, and there is at least one SNP MP advocating that should happen, because he happens to think that if they did so, then they would win it, and then they could then use that as a justification for a second referendum. But what he doesn't realise is that the SNP are not going to get themselves in order this year in order to do something like that. I mean, the SNP is, believe me, in disarray at the moment. Graham says, so when Boris and Truss quit, Sturgeon demanded an election because it was not democratic just to appoint a leader from the membership. So why are they not demanding an election in Scotland? SNP double standards. Absolutely, Graham. I agree. Debbie's fine. Excellent stuff. Good. Adam says, the SNP probably won't call an election because they're scared they'll lose. I mean, yes, look at the state they're in. Aren't they just... Well, I wanted to begin by just talking about the favourite, Humza Yousaf. Okay, now, we've had it in for Humza. That's a nice piece of alliteration, for quite a long time now. And in the 2021 Scottish election, we had posters saying get rid of Humza. And just prior to the May 2021 election, Humza negotiated an anti-free speech bill through Holyrood, and it was voted on the 11th of March in 2021, and we campaigned strongly against it. He euphemistically called it a hate crime bill to stop people talking hate, but of course it was really just intended to suppress speech that he didn't like. And we came up with the phrase, and we've got one or two pictures here of the wee poster that we came up with, which said, which portrayed Humza in the kind of in a sort of authoritarian SS style uniform, which we'll just put up on the screen. Humza says, you've had a bit too much to think. And that's Humza there looking very friendly and open-minded to your point of view. Humza says, you've had a little bit too much to think. And we took that poster and we put it outside Holyrood when we were there, and that's the next picture. Humza says, you've had a bit too much to think. That was on the 10th of March. That was the first day of the two-day debate, and this is back in March 2021. Now, that was actually a lockdown period, and myself and my colleague, we did a live broadcast outside Holyrood, and I went down with a megaphone because I wanted to stand outside and just berate the concrete with my point of view. But there was some police officers there who wouldn't allow me to use the megaphone, and they didn't allow me to put that poster up either, so I had to take it down. And such freedom of speech, fantastic stuff. And it was all kind of ridiculous. That was Humza's. We also put it outside Humza's constituency office. Interestingly, he's no longer based at that constituency office, because after that election, the police advised him for some reason to go to another office within a closed building. So back in 2021, you could just walk into Humza's office off the street, but you can't do that now. You have to go through various, you have to get buzzed in to the actual office complex now. So much for accessibility, eh? And we strapped that poster outside his office: "Get Humza out, hashtag Scottish ejection." Scottish ejection, that was quite clever, that. And there's Humza there with his policeman's cap. There is a close-up for you as well. Yeah, that was back at the Scottish election in 2021. So let's remember that Humza is very much anti-free speech, and I have to say as well that I know they're giving Kate Forbes a hard time at the moment for her outspoken religious points of view, but she voted for that hate speech bill, okay, which was intended essentially to keep outspoken religious people quiet, lest they offend anybody with their quote-unquote hate. So she voted for that. I have to say, didn't reflect well upon her at all for voting for that, as did Ash Regan. She also voted for that anti-free speech bill, although her name at the time was Ash Denham prior to her being married. And also Anas Sarwar voted for that anti-free speech bill as well. And in fact, we've got the full list of people who voted for and against it in an article that we wrote at the time, and we'll just put that link. You'll find that in the comments. D. Stanners says, Muslim and Indian Councils of Scotland both released a joint statement against useless and encouraging votes for the other two candidates. Yes, notice that. That's interesting. They did these. I don't know how representative those particular two groups are, but they do claim to speak for a certain number of Muslims and Indians, and they were joined together both against Humza. And in fact, what was very interesting as well is that in that statement they said, are you going to ask Humza Yousaf the sort of penetrating questions that you asked Kate Forbes? Like, do you believe in sex before marriage and things like that? Questions that you can't imagine they would ever ask Humza, but they always pick on a Christian to ask those sorts of questions. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow they're actually asking Kate Forbes, oh, do you believe that when Moses parted the Red Sea, do you believe they actually did that literally, or do you take that more metaphorically? Things like that. It's amazing the extent to which they'll put a Christian under the microscope and try to get them to answer very difficult, often questions, but they don't seem to bother with other people. It's interesting that, because a few years ago in Scotland, if you were not a Bible-believing Christian, then you wouldn't be considered suitable to be a leader of the country. Now it's gone the almost exact opposite way in a very short space of time. In my lifetime, in fact. Adam says, knock knock, who's there? Yousaf. Yousaf who? Yousaf no That's a good one. I'm going to start that again. Knock knock, who's there? Yousaf. Yousaf who? Yous have no path to a second referendum. Boom, Adam, did you make that up? That's quality. Absolutely. Yous have no path to a second referendum. I like that. Oh. Good. Thanks to D. Quinn for sharing the live. Please do that, folks. Please share on TikTok. Please share on YouTube and on Facebook, and if you're going to please retweet with a quote tweet, which means they press the quote tweet button and then write something positive, which means we can then retweet you to 27,600 people. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, we've got our guest coming on at the bottom of the hour. Before that, I just want to talk about a couple of lessons that we can learn from the past week, which stand out a mile, you know. The first thing is that standing up to the SNP Greens works. For most of devolution, the way of looking at it was just let the SNP and Greens do what they want, because if you stand up to them, if you don't give them what they want, if you try to overturn what they've done, that will be terrible. They'll get all the support, and you, the British government, will lose all the support, and the Unionists will lose out. Well, no, that's not what happens, because that's not how politics or life works. Look what happened when Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, stood up to Sturgeon and said, guess what? You are not going to be allowed to pass that bill into law. Look what happened. Within, 2 or 3 weeks, Sturgeon resigned. Okay? That's how devastating that was. Because it was suddenly, she came up against an immovable object. And that's all it took. And of course, I know there were other reasons, cumulative reasons why she resigned. But putting that block in her way and saying this far and no further worked. And it worked a dream. It couldn't have worked any better. It removed Sturgeon. It helped to remove Sturgeon. And it threw the SNP into absolute chaos. So don't tell me that standing up to the SNP is somehow going to lose Unionist votes, or it's going to be bad for the Union, or it's only going to help the SNP or something like that. No, that's not how it works. When you stand up, either in situations like this or in any situation in life, what you do is you create what's called a new dynamic. Because suddenly you've got an opponent who's thrown onto the back foot, and then they start coming away with things that then changes the nature of the debate, and then new opportunities arise out of that. So, standing up works. What won't work is just constantly submitting, constantly appeasing, constantly going along with the flow in the hope that somebody will notice that you're being reasonable. No, that doesn't work. That just prolongs the agony. That prolongs the agony until you ultimately perish. So standing up works. That's the first thing that Unionists can understand. Standing up works. And it worked a dream. An absolute dream. So it gives the lie to the idea that the British government has always got to tread lightly around the SNP. No. The first time it stands up to the SNP, what happens? The leader resigns and the party gets thrown into chaos. Okay? So, that's the first thing. And the second thing as well is that, and it sort of flows from that, is that a lot of what Sturgeon claimed to have been a success was actually gifted to her by the British government. What do I mean by that? Well, in her resignation speech, she said this, quote, "We have also shown over these past few years what can be done with the full powers of a nation, creating new institutions that are part of the transition to becoming independent. New tax and social security agencies." Well, she is right there in that new tax and social security agencies are part of, if you want to look at it that way, the transition to becoming independent. Is the sort of thing, it's the kind of institutions that you want your country to have if you want to become a separate country. But who gifted those tax and social security agencies to Sturgeon? They came about as a direct consequence of the so-called vow by Gordon Brown before and after the 2014 referendum. And they were put into law by the British government in the Scotland Act 2016. And we warned against that. We said, you're just basically gifting them these institutions which are costing the British taxpayer hundreds of millions to set up. And we're warning you that's only going to help their long-term agenda. And of course, that's what it has done. And that's what that sort of behaviour will always do. But she was quoting that as if it was her big success. Well, only in the extent that the British government gifted those to her and said, you set up your own institutions for tax and social security. But of course, she wouldn't mention or be grateful to the British government for that, because as we always know, the Scottish National Party and the Greens will take what you give them without thanks, bank it, and then pretend like they never received it. And that was a consequence of the British government at the time, after the 2014 referendum, completely failing to take advantage of the new situation which had arisen, which was a massive unionist win in 2014, completely failing to grasp the opportunity there that it could have done in order to clarify aspects of devolution, to rein in powers of the SNP, and to build institutions and cultures and such like things which would strengthen the union, the sort of things which we've detailed at length in our magazine Do More Together, which you can get at our shop. A consequence of being absolutely, utterly passive in the face of the SNP loss, and in fact, being worse than passive, actually bringing gifts to the losers, as if the losers were in fact the winners, and as if the losers were somehow the new masters that you had to appease. And so the Cameron government at the time, bringing these gifts, showering the losers with all of these gifts, the new tax powers, the new social security agencies, all those sorts of new things, in order to ensure that the SNP didn't really feel like they lost. In fact, they just hit like a nice bouncy bed and bounced straight back again. Absolutely utter lack of imagination. Utter lack of imagination to keep the United Kingdom together. What a wasted moment. And of course, what did that end up doing in the 2015 general election? Labour, which had 41 parliamentary seats in Scotland, lost all but one of them. And the SNP won 56 of the 59 parliamentary seats, when in fact they could have been obliterated if David Cameron had a set of the proverbial and knew how to take advantage of a winning situation. But he, unfortunately, as history records, did not know. However, we went out of our way constantly to tell him how to do it. And prior to the event, prior to 2014, back when we were less graphically capable, we published these: Dissolving Not Dissolving, Dissolving Not Devolving, and Devo Danger. And they're available for a small amount of money on at our shop. and you can get them for historical purposes. But these are going to become more important again, because if Labour wins the next general election, then Labour, who never learned from their mistakes, will do the same thing again, and they will shower the SNP and the Scottish Parliament with new powers, which the Scottish National Party, of course, will simply use to consolidate their own position, and as Sturgeon puts it, to consolidate what they like to call the transition to independence. So we have to be aware of that as another possibility coming up. Indeed, indeed. Does Scotland deserve devolution, Adam? Well, that's a philosophical question. Robert says, the Unionist parties in Scotland at the moment don't have what it takes to make Scotland the country it should be. Strong in the Union, safest for our children with best education back again. Indeed, indeed, they need to get their act together. Adam says he heard a siren in the background. Are the police after you? Not yet. And hopefully never. Although, what does Harry say? I don't understand why it matters to ask about religious belief or ideas to make great leaders. Most of the people who shun religion is a loud minority. Okay, now just before our guest comes on at the top of the hour, we'll have our On This Day in British History, and afterwards I'll ask you a question about that, and the prize is a Union Jack patch along with a Union Jack keyring cum trolley token. Check that out, folks. That's the prize. I'll ask it after On This Day in British History. On This Day in British History. So, on this day in British history, which was the... let me get it straight. Yes, it was the last invasion of Britain on the 22nd of February. The 22nd of February, 1797. And this was when the French, believe it or not, decided somewhat chaotically to invade Britain. And this was part of the Revolutionary Wars at the end of the 18th century, when the French wanted to hitch up with an organisation called the Society of United Irishmen. And the French had this crazy idea that they were going to land 15,000 troops in Bantry Bay, which is in County Cork, and that these troops would join up with the Society of United Irishmen and somehow fight the British. But what they also wanted to do was to have two diversionary forces. One would attack Newcastle and one would attack South Wales. And this would create confusion in the British ranks, and it would help the United Irishmen to win whatever they were complaining about back in 1797. However, the fleet, which Wikipedia tells us was 15,000 men, which seems an awful lot, but take the word for it. They failed to land in December of 1796 because of the weather. So they all sailed back to France. And by this time, from what I can see, the whole plan seems to have fallen apart, because a month later, a diversionary force went up to Newcastle, but failed to land again in Newcastle because of the dire weather. And so February rolls around, and I don't know if the message had got to the guy who was commanding the French who were going to hit Wales, but he decides to land his troops, and he was actually an Irish American who had fought the British in the Revolutionary Wars in America. And he and his men landed in Fishguard, of all places, in Pembrokeshire. And basically, the whole point of the operation by this time had kind of fallen apart and was a bit ridiculous. And basically all the guys just kind of landed there and chaotically all got rounded up, essentially, and there was no real fight. And they all surrendered, essentially. But it's regarded as the last time that the British Isles was invaded. And a folk hero arose, a woman called Jemima Nicholas, and we've got a photograph of her here, which we'll just put up. And she is said to have organised local women to... That's not Jemima Nicholas, it's the Fishguard woman. That's her there, with her pitchfork, and that's probably the Irish chap called Colonel William Tate, and he's being ushered into the jail there by Jemima Nicholas, and she's said to have been able to capture 12 Frenchmen by this unique pitchfork method all by herself. And so that's some British history, British Isles history actually, because it involves all parts of our often quarrelsome people. Okay, good. Now I'm just going to bring in Ash in a second, and just bear with me while I move that about. So the question I want to ask for this, and please send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. To contact@aforceforgood.uk. There we go. The question is, on this day in 1797, the last invasion of Britain, and can you name the town that was at the centre of that invasion? The first person to get that right gets these sent to them tomorrow morning. Now, folks, we have got the one and only Ash, that Preston Journalist. I'm going to bring him in here. Please give a very great British welcome to Ash. Good evening, Ash. Can you hear me? Let me...
Sorry, it's me. I was on mute.
Hello, can you hear?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Okay, Ash. How's things tonight?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Okay, we don't have any sound. We don't have any sound with Ash. How's your microphone, Ash? Is it switched on? You haven't got anything
better?
muted?
Can you not hear me now? Hello?
Okay, I'm going to ask our assistant producer to communicate with Ash via the private chat to tell him that we cannot hear him, and we'll come back in a second for that. Okay. I'm being told that it's a problem at my end. I'm sorry about this. Just bear with me. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and I'm going to come back in, and we will Hello, Ash. Any
Can you hear me?
luck here? Can you hear me? Say
I can
something,
hear you
Ash?
fine, yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
I can't hear. Now that's a pity. That is a pity. Oh, well, do you know what, Ash? This doesn't seem like it's going to, doesn't look like it's going to work, I'm afraid.
Is that any better? Can you hear me now?
There's really nothing that I can do at this stage. So, Ash, I'm sorry about this, but rather than us just sit here and say nothing, I'm afraid I am going to have to just stop this interview completely, because it's not going to work. Do you want to just, we can maybe have one last go. If you want to
Check the private
go
chat.
out completely and then come back in again and see if that makes any difference. Well, that's a bummer, isn't it? I have tried taking the headphones out and putting the headphones back in again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have to call the TikTok thing to an end, folks. We'll see you on TikTok next week. Sorry about that. And hello, Ash. Any luck here?
Is that better?
No. Well, folks, I'm sorry. It's my bad. This is live broadcasting is a tricky thing, especially a tricky thing when you are doing it on the fly or with just a couple of folk to help. But I'm afraid the headphones are not working at all, as far as that's concerned. So, Ash, I'm sorry, but we'll have to go up. I'm going to have to ask my assistant producer to apologise to you profusely, but there's nothing that I can do at this end to get it sorted within the next 10 minutes. Sorry about that. That's really my bad.
No problem, everyone.
Well, folks, that's annoying. That's upsetting. And the Catherine says we don't mind these things happen. Yeah, they shouldn't happen though, should they? This is our 50th broadcast and that shouldn't be happening to us at this stage. It's a fault in the studio because I know other people said that they could hear him. So it's a fault in the studio with our equipment here that I'm looking at, and we're going to need to just have to really look at that. New headphones. Derek says we've got other headphones. Will our other headphones work? And I know that I can test it on something else. So I'll test the sound with these. No, it doesn't work with those either. And I've checked that these are I've checked that the audio is set for this particular thing as well. Okay, well, let's shift direction, I'm afraid, and let me talk about how I see the next few years sorting out as we move forward. Let me talk about that for the next 15 minutes. You know, the Scottish National Party have definitely been put on the back foot, and this is throwing them, just as it's thrown me there a little bit, and it is going to ensure that they're not going to have the referendum this year that they expected, and they're very unlikely to have one next year or indeed the year after. So we could be looking at 2 or 3 years of politics, probably right up to the Holyrood election, where the idea of a second referendum simply is not going to happen. And the next Holyrood election is scheduled for May in 2026. So what can a group like ourselves at A Force for Good do? Well, you know, we're not just going to give up as if this is we're not just going to sit back and rest on our laurels as if the country is safe, because the country is not safe. What's going to happen is that the Scottish National Party will simply switch. I mean, they're campaigning all the time. If they can't campaign politically for a second referendum, if that's not feasible, then they're going to continue to undermine the United Kingdom in whatever way that they can. And we spoke about this on our Facebook page this week. One of the things that they're going to do is to continue to promote in whatever way they can, and continue to undermine in whatever way they can the very identity of being British, in order that if they were ever to have a second referendum, enough people would have become disenchanted, or indeed removed or completely dissociated from the idea of being British itself, to the point where they wouldn't even see the point of a union. And how do they do that? They do that through what might be called not education, but mal-education. Okay, education in a bad way. And one of the things that they would be helped on here is, of course, that this is a tendency throughout the United Kingdom at the moment, not just in Scotland, to speak to speak badly of Britain and its past and its history and so on. And there's an imported American ideology called CRT, or critical race theory. But it's not just about race, it's just generally about the history of, well, in America, history of America, but it can be applied to any nation that you want to try to undermine or to speak badly of. And that is to take its history and turn it into simply a history of exploitation, a history of oppression, a history of bad things, you know, like racism and all that kind of stuff. And British history is so vast and so expansive that it's very easy for a mal-educator to come in there and take any issue that they want, and to try to twist it in a bad way. And this is happening in Scottish schools, and it's happening throughout the United Kingdom. I don't know to to what extent. I don't know to what extent, but I know that it's to an extent enough that a new teachers' union has been set up positively to actually try to combat that sort of stuff. And we spoke about that on our Facebook page this week. And let me just bring up the actual name of the organisation there, which was the Scottish Union for Education, and the chairman of that is somebody called Dr. Stuart, Stuart Waiton, Waiton, and he had an article in the Spectator online talking about CRT indoctrination in schools, and that made us realise that, goodness me, that's something that needs to be addressed. But here's the thing about addressing it, is the British government's never going to do that. It's never going to do that. We've been calling on the British government to address the union issue year in, year out. Only now, last month, did they actually do something as far as standing up to Holyrood is concerned. But we don't have a great deal of faith that they're going to do much else. And they're certainly not going to address the CRT problem properly. There's too many vested interests to do it. I'd like to think that they will. Maybe they will, but it's unlikely that they will. So what I'm trying to say here is that we cannot be looking to government for the answers here. We've got to look to people like Dr. Stuart Waiton, who set up his Scottish Union for Education, and ourselves in our organisation as well. We've got to make that, as we always do, a priority. Looking at British history, revisiting British history, promoting British history, very much from a unionist perspective, or what we like to say, telling the story of Britain. Which, I say it myself, we're actually quite good at doing here, and we do it every day across all our media platforms. So one of the goals in the next 2 or 3 years of A Force for Good is to address that matter, to ensure that we can promote our British heritage, or what I like to call our British story, and we're working on that at the moment. The next issue of Union Heart, our 12-page magazine, is probably going to be 12 pages, might be 16 pages, more likely to be 12, is going to be on the Union of the Crowns. Its 420th anniversary year, and we're learning so much about that period that has not properly been brought out. It's interesting that there's so much pro-British stuff in that period which has not properly been brought out. We published an article last week, which we'll put up, you'll find in the comments, from that period, from 1604, a Scottish writer called Thomas Craig, promoting a very radical vision for British Union, full and complete, as he called it, political union. That's back in 1604. We need to bring all that stuff out again, and he, like many of the other authors that we were talking about during in our history series, what he was doing as well was he was identifying the idea of Britain as existing before it was broken up into separate parts, before it was broken up into Scotland, England and Wales. And he was saying, let's get back to that unity. And that was way back in 1604. Yet still we'll get Scottish nationalists writing regularly into the National, like this one here. Talk of mythical Britain is nothing but a political ploy. And this guy writes a whole long letter about how, would you believe it, Britishness, British and Britain doesn't actually exist. Oh, that boils my proverbial. That really does, because it's like, what, you're saying that I don't exist? That we don't exist? That the entire nation doesn't exist? The cheek, the absolute cheek. Oh, the absolute cheek. Oh, my goodness me. It really annoys me. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing, concentrating on telling the British story, as well as, of course, continuing to broadcast daily across all our socials, daily, weekly, monthly and yearly, until the Scot Nats see clearly that we're down with the U to the K to the A to the double FG, and to continue to stand, as we always do, in the streets, whether that's during our programme of summer street stalls, or whether it's at our counter demos, or whether it's at other initiatives that we might take, flying the flag, letting people know that the British cause exists. That's so, so important. Derek says we need to re-educate schools, especially in Scotland, about the full facts. Ryan says the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon from the office of First Minister is to be welcomed, but will no doubt leave no respite from the designs of the secessionist movement. Absolutely. The Unionist community ought to remain on point in countering any such separatist agendas. Well, as far as we are concerned, we will certainly do that. Yes, Sturgeon might end up as one of the characters in the British Horrible Histories series. Yeah. Still annoyed about how our audio system failed us here. And we must apologise to Ash for that. Oh gosh. Yep. Yeah. Well, we certainly will do a test run next time. What does this button do? But we've had Ash on so many times and it's worked perfectly. But we'll certainly always do that. Yeah, we'll do that. Or we'll get maybe, yeah. So who would be the best First Minister? I was going to ask Ash that. Goodness me, as I was speaking to somebody earlier today, you know, the most, if you want to call SNP people sensible, I mean, this is the thing, they can appear to be sensible, but they're members of the SNP, so you've always got to weigh that into the balance. Anyway, Kate Forbes has obviously got an intelligent brain, or intelligent head on her shoulders, that's the expression, but she's still a member of the SNP, so you've got to balance that out there. She's possibly maybe the most sensible of the three of them, and so you'd think maybe she would do the best job to, you know, run the country effectively, and so that's what you want, theoretically. However, from the Unionist perspective, you think, well, what if Humza Yousaf got in and then he made a complete hash of it? But you see, and I was reading this somewhere, I think it was Simon Heffer in the Sunday Telegraph of the 19th. He was pointing out that the Scottish Nationalist supporters, the SNP supporters, their core will vote for anybody, whether that person is, you know, the most intelligent person in the world, or whether the person's a complete numpty. They'll vote for that person, whether that person takes Scotland to great heights, or whether that person runs Scotland into the ground. They'll still vote for that person. They'll still vote for that party. So, does it really matter? I'm not sure it matters that much, who's going to be First Minister. But wouldn't it be strange if Humza Yousaf got in? I mean, that would mean the next British general election, you'd have Humza Yousaf for the SNP, you'd have Anas Sarwar for Labour. And so that would be the choice. And you'd have Rishi Sunak, head of the British government. Gosh, unusual times, really. Unusual. Now, do we have a winner, I wonder, of our competition? D. Stanner says, at least Forbes is honest. Yes, she seems to be quite outspoken these days. Chris says they're all lunatics. Paul says stick an SNP rosette on a donkey and they'll vote for it. What does this button do? Says devolved administrations are more easily corrupted, playing past the power parcel to the constant detriment with no Tory recovery. Well, certainly, Jill, Humza would continue the Sturgeon legacy, and Humza is Sturgeon's favourite. She wants him to win, to continue that legacy. So that's a big advantage for him. Now, the question that we had, and I don't know if people maybe picked it up, but it was for this. And we asked the question, the invasion, the last invasion of Britain was on this day, 22nd of February in 1797. And where was the invasion? And the invasion was in Fishguard, which is in Pembrokeshire. And that was the French invaded on behalf of the United Irishmen. Oh my, crazy wars back in those days. And it looks like we don't actually have a winner. Maybe the question was too hard, or maybe the what happened was that the problem there with Ash maybe threw some people just as it threw me. So apparently nobody got the answer right. But we'll roll that one over. We'll roll that one over. That's fine. No problemo. It's easy to enter. All you do is send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Folks, we've come to the top of the hour. I'm sorry about that disappointment there with Ash, and I feel sorry for wasting Ash's time, but it's something to do with that. But what, I don't know. We'll get it sorted out. We'll get it sorted out. Folks, basically it just remains for me to say thank you for watching. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for all the comments that you sent in. And we'll be back next week. We'll be back next Wednesday. So it just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.